Hello everyone, this is Gene. I'm back for the second video of the day. So, I just came across this and I just want to give my very, I hope, brief. We all know that with me, when I say brief, it's probably going to go on for like 30 minutes. But, first things first, I want to give a shout out to Stephen Wayne Art because it was his quote tweet that ended up in my timeline, which alerted me to this. So thank you, Stephen Wayne, and your art is fabulous, by the way. So we have this person named Cheyenne, calls herself Cheyenne The Geek. I'm assuming she's a Comic Con, given the NYCC. And it says here in her the little part of her bio off on the side, it says that she's an actress, writer, host of Anime Club, Prime Video, so I'm assuming that's with Amazon, host of Funimation Flashback, talk nerd stuff for a living, I make funnies too. Okay, so seems like she's part of what you might call, the mainstream, right? Amazon is not indie. Funimation certainly isn't indie. And given how Funimation treated Vic Mignogna 2 years ago, Funimation, in my opinion, is still a den of snakes. And any honest person left in that company should get the hell out, right? Kind of like, Babylon the Great in the scriptures, right? It's like, get out of her, my people. I suggest that if you're still an honest soul in Funimation, get out. But anyway, it says here, today I learned that Robotech the Anime was one of the first, if not the first, animated kids show in the US to feature interracial relationships in the 80s. Imagine that in anime? Yes. Yes. Now, I will admit I'm not too familiar with Robotech. Given my age, I really didn't start watching anime until probably about the mid 1990s. So it's 90s stuff that I'm a bit more familiar with, but I'm not surprised by this at all. The thing is that a lot of media, starting probably back to the late 70s at least, perhaps those older than me can clue me in, but I would say that media probably starting at least in the late 70s, music, movies, TV, anime, which was just starting to sort of get an entryway into the US and whatnot, was incredibly diverse and featured interracial relationships, not just of the romantic type, which is what we tend to think of when you hear of an interracial relationship, but take for example the student teacher relationship between Daniel-san and Mr. Miyagi um, in the Karate Kid films, right? At least in the first three. Then you have the Karate Kid Part 4, where Mr. Miyagi mentors a young Hilary Swank, but nobody ever talks about that. But anyway, you had films like that, right? That showed that we could overcome our differences, right? You take what many would say today, right? A privileged young white boy, Italian boy, right? And his friend and teacher and father figure is this older, sort of world weary, fresh off the boat, or at least he sounds like he's fresh off the boat, Japanese man, right? Given their difference in age and life experiences, right? Mr. Miyagi having lost much of his family in World War II, and given what the U.S. did to Japan in World War II, right? It's like here are two people who could let all of those differences come between them, but they don't, right? They develop this very beautiful and admirable, student teacher, father son, or perhaps grandson grandfather type relationship, which is still going on strong, even with uh, Pat Morita, aka Mr. Miyagi's passing in real life. So his character, obviously, when he's mentioned in Cobra Kai, is has passed along as well, but they still keep his memory alive, and he's considered a part of the family, right? He's considered to be the grandfather to Daniel's children, right? So 80s and 90s media, and this is not to say media prior to that did not focus on this. I'm just bringing this up because obviously, given my age, being under the age of 40, uh, 90s and especially 80s and especially 90s media and the 2000s, everything that came after that is what I am most knowledgeable in. So that's what I'm going to focus on. But if you're older, you can please, chime in the comments. I just don't have much of a strong knowledge base for anything pre 80s. But if you know anything more, please let me know. But anyway, media in the late 70s, 80s, and certainly going into the 90s and beyond, you know, a lot of the focus up until maybe about a decade or so ago was diversity, was, finding unity and camaraderie and friendship and working together despite differences, right? Being, some would say, colorblind, right? Not looking at a person's race or their origin or their background and deeming them good or evil just because of that, right? I grew up watching shows like, as goofy as they may seem now, shows like, Conan the Adventurer or Biker Mice from Mars or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or, Gargoyles, X Men in particular, right? That their whole thing is diversity. And as I mentioned in another video recently, right, one of their best episodes, and for me, my favorite episode, was the two-parter One Man's Worth, which features the white, male Wolverine and Storm, who's, this African woman in this very, passionate, if ultimately tragic, alternate universe romance. Right? And guess what? At least when I was a kid, I don't recall people making a big deal out of it. I'm not saying that never happened. I know certainly in the 60s with Star Trek, right, when like Kirk and Uhura are made to kiss, people got all up in arms about that. I understand that, but by the time I was watching TV and all that and consuming media as a kid in the 90s, there wasn't, at least from what I can tell, there wasn't a lot of outcry about that. And whatever outcry there was about it, people usually said, pretty much, dismissed it, right? Or spoke out against it. You, back then, it would have been odd. You would have been the odd one out, right? If you were surprised by seeing a interracial relationship, at least in media, perhaps in real life, no doubt it's very different. But at least in media, right, the person who made a stink about an interracial relationship of any type would have been the one people looked at and went, "Really, bro? Really?" Like, that was the type of response you would have got back in the day. Back when I was and watching TV and consuming media. I mean, I read her tweet and I'm like, I wonder what she thinks about, Shaman King, which features Native Americans, right? And it features at least one black character. What was his name? Choco Love or whatever it was, right? Or like, I remember when I was a kid, one of my really real talk, one of the earliest examples I can think of diversity is probably playing Street Fighter and Streets of Rage all the time. I played Street Fighter for about a half hour before I had to go to school, hated school, endured school, came back home, played Streets of Rage. I didn't care about the ethnicities or nationalities of the characters, right? I had no knowledge of that. My knowledge was, oh, Ryu is from this country called Japan. That's cool. Honda is from Japan. Okay, cool. Chun-Li is from this place called China. Okay, fine. Right? India. I don't know how you say Dalsim's name. Someone help me. Right? This is back where like we would always say Ryu because no one taught us how to say Asian names. It wouldn't take it. I wouldn't learn how to say Ryu properly until I watched anime. So like decades later, whenever I hear in Mortal Kombat 11 someone say Shirai Ryu, I'm like, that's wrong. It's wrong. You're saying it wrong. Right, but real talk, like that I think is the best way to feature diversity. Just do it. Just show it. Right? Stop trying to make this huge virtue signal out of it. Right? I didn't care as a kid that Goliath isn't human and Elisa is brown skinned. All I was all I wanted was to beat her as a kid because it's like she's got a freaking Goliath. Like, why can't that be me? That's all I cared about. Or Storm. It's like, girl, I will take your place. I don't mind. I don't mind being Wolverine's girl. I have no issue with this. That's all I cared about. Even stuff, as goofy as pro wrestling, that was diverse when I was growing up. Like real talk, the first women's pro wrestling match that I can remember seeing was, I think it was SummerSlam 1992. It's Alundra Blaze, so this white Italian woman, versus Bull Nakano, this large Japanese lady with her hair sticking up straight up in the air. God knows how much hairspray she needed for that. She's like one half of her face is covered in this like lightning pattern makeup. My little mind was blown when I saw her. Like all she had to do was just walk to the ring in this long robe, and then she took out these like nunchucks and she did this like nunchuck demo. I was sold. I didn't care about black or white or Japanese or American. None of that registered in my head. I didn't know any of that. All I knew was this lady is amazing. She's automatically my favorite. There's Shawn Michaels, her, and then everyone else. That was all I needed. That was all I needed as a kid. I wish that people like Cheyenne, right? I've seen a few people dogging her in the comments, and I don't think that's right. But I do wish people like Cheyenne would understand why people like me or people who are a bit older in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and even older get upset when we see, the media that we grew up with, right, be remade and reimagined and bastardized, and then we're told that it's being done to be more inclusive. It's like, it was inclusive. It was designed to be inclusive. It was that way by design, and now you're saying that we're somehow retroactively guilty of some sort of diversity that we had no say in, that the media already had. Right? That's why we get so upset. It's like, oh, today you learned. Wonderful. I was there when it happened. You know what I mean? That I think is why so many of us get angry. It's like, we've been doing what you say that you want to do now for literal decades. Entire generations have grown up with the idea that interracial relationships are just fine. So like, why are you surprised? And then, of course, she has to say down here, this anime, it was hella dramatic to know that this was a gateway show for a lot of otaku boomers is wild. How ageist of you, Cheyenne. How ageist of you. Do you know what the beauty of things like anime or any sort of animation or just any sort of media is? It doesn't matter how old you are. You can get into something at any time. That's the beauty of it. That is the beauty of it. The work is not ageist. If it's a good work, it will last forever. If it's a good work, it will last forever. Now, of course, there's a difference between getting into something when it's sort of like past its peak, past its fame, right, and getting into something, say, like when it was happening. But being a fan is not dependent on time, right? For example, I'll use music. I'm a huge Queen and Guns N' Roses fan. By the time I'd heard about Queen, Freddie Mercury had long been dead, and by the time I started listening to Guns N' Roses, the band had been broken up for probably a decade, right? But the music endures, the music remains. To quote Led Zeppelin, the song stays the same. Nobody cares about what age I was when I became a fan of Queen or Guns N' Roses. All they care about is, hey, are you a fan of Queen and Guns N' Roses? So are we. Awesome. What's your favorite song? Right? That's all that matters. Right? That's all that matters, and what works for music works for anime or anything else. If you're a fan of DBZ, you might have gotten into it when it first came out in the 80s. Maybe you got into it like many people my age did because of Toonami and Funimation in the 1990s. Maybe you got into it with later series like Super or whatever, and that's awesome. So when it comes to ageist BS like this does get under my skin a bit, because this is just not necessary. The beauty of fandom, and this is, oh sorry, Gen Xers, you mean old people. We all understand that when somebody refers to another person as a boomer, what they're saying is that you are old and out of touch and past your prime. This is media that will most likely outlive us all. That's what makes it good. If you can get into it and become a fan and fall in love with it at any time, that means it's good media. So the ageist BS needs to go. And this is coming from a boomer. Boom. But anyway, outside of that, I just wanted to, I guess, just sort of get this little rant off of my chest. Cheyenne, maybe you should open your mind a little bit and listen to those boomers who were there when the diversity that you claim modern works lack, or that older works need to be retrofitted for, right? Maybe you should listen to us boomers, and we can explain to you how the stuff we grew up with was just fine, and we don't need uh, folks like you in the modern day altering something that did not need to be changed, because it already had what you claim to want. Okay, we already ran this diversity race, and now not only do you run over all of the progress that we made, you bastardize what we did and then claim that you're somehow doing it better. See, I fixed it. No, you didn't. Right? So basically, respect your elders. As cheesy as that sounds, respect your elders and respect the history of a work and of that fan base, instead of acting all surprised that media that is around 35 to 40 years old actually had diversity and was a gateway to diversity. No, it was not a gateway. It was not this new or original idea at that time. It simply was. It simply was. And we simply accepted it. If you were talking about something from the 50s or 60s, maybe you'd have a point. But you're not. But anyway, I just wanted to just get that off of my chest. And look, I'm going to make it under 30 minutes for once in life. Anyway, please let me know what you think, and I will see you all in the next one. Have a good day or night, wherever you are, and enjoy your weekend. Bye.